A knife, which had been used to cut string, was lying upon a table. I seized it and drove it into her neck. She fled from the room screaming.
Fast asleep.
Welcome to Fast Asleep with Gina Marie. Welcome to your well-deserved respite from the rest of the world. Let's go now to a different time and a different place as we tuck in and enjoy a classic short story. Hello, everybody. I'm Gina. I'm backed, of course, by the hardworking engineer Bob and the occasional working Marie. And we continue to celebrate this somewhat spectral time of year with another mesmerizing storyteller. Today's is new to Fast Asleep. This author made his reputation early with his stories of the macabre. He is the American-born writer, Vincent O'Sullivan. No picture here. None available. First time. Now, this man shares his name with a New Zealand-born poet. No relation. Also a poet, a short story writer, and a critic, our Vincent O'Sullivan was born in 1868 in New York City. His father, Eugene, was an Irish immigrant who made his fortune here in the U.S. in the coffee trade, founded the Long Island College Hospital, and left his two sons a $1 million inheritance upon his death. Put the value of today in comments if you think of it. Vincent and his brother Percy were educated in New York until they moved to England to attend the Catholic Oscott School in Birmingham. Vincent was admitted to Oxford in 1892, but left after only one term, choosing instead to write essays and poetry full-time. He lived very comfortably in England and occasionally in France until Brother Percy made an unfortunate decision with the family fortune and lost it all in 1909. Destitute is the word that describes O'Sullivan's life from this point on in every biography I've read. And this is when Vincent chooses to focus on supernatural fiction. Oh, very morbid fiction. He had begun these stories a few years earlier and had produced his first collection entitled A Book of Bargains, published in 1896. One tale involves a bargain with the devil. Fast Asleep will bring you two of his stories today, and the first is from this collection. Now, his novel, The Good Girl, received high praise from critics and was listed in author John Cooper Powis's 1916 publication entitled 100 Best Books. Powis called The Good Girl, quote, a work of genius in every sense of the word, unquote. Fellow authors Oscar Wilde and Robert Aickman also lauded O'Sullivan's work. Aickman claimed that Vincent wrote his last book, Opinions. Oh, by the way, this one was published many years after his death. Here's what Aickman said, quote, he died under terrible conditions in Paris and ending anonymously in the common pit for cadavers of paupers, unquote. It is not known how Mr. O'Sullivan died, but we do know it was in 1940. He was 71. Shall we dig in? Today's first of two stories begins with a quote chosen by the author from William Shakespeare's All's Well That Ends Well. And yet my heart will not confess he owes the malady that doth my life besiege. Published in 1896. Tuck in, everybody, for Vincent O'Sullivan's When I Was Dead. That was the worst of Ravenel Hall. The passages were long and gloomy. The rooms were musty and dull. Even the pictures were somber, and their subjects dire. On an autumn evening, when the wind soughed and ailed through the trees in the park, and the dead leaves whistled and chattered, while the rain clamored at the windows. Small wonder that folks with gentle nerves went a-straying in their wits. An acute nervous system is a grievous burthen on the deck of a yacht under sunlit skies. At Ravenel, the chain of nerves was prone to clash and jangle a funeral march. Nerves must be pampered in a tea-drinking community. And the ghost that your grandfather, with a skinful of port, could face and never tremble, sets you, in your sobriety, sweating and shivering, or becoming scared, poor ghost, of your bulged eyes and dropping jaw. He quenches expectation by not appearing at all. So, I am left to conclude that it was tea which made my acquaintance afraid to stay at Ravenel. Even Wilvern gave over, and he is in the Guards, and a polo player. His nerves ought to be strong enough. On the night before he went, I was explaining to him my theory that if you place some drops of human blood near you, and then concentrate your thoughts, you will, after a while, see before you a man or a woman who will stay with you during long hours of the night, and even meet you at unexpected places during the day. I was explaining this theory, I repeat, when he interrupted me with words senseless enough, which sent me fencing and parrying strangers. On my guard. Oh, I say, Alistair, my dear chap, he began, you ought to get out of this place and go up to town and knock about a bit. You really ought, you know. Yes, I replied, and get poisoned at the hotels by bad food, and at the clubs by bad talk, I suppose. Huh. No, thank you. And let me say that your care for my health enervates me. Well, you can do as you like, says he, rapping with his feet on the floor. I'm hanged if I stay here after tomorrow. I'll be staring mad if I do. He was my last visitor. Some weeks after his departure, I was sitting in the library with my drops of blood by me. I had got my theory nearly perfect by this time, but there was one difficulty. The figure which I had ever before me was the figure of an old woman, with her hair divided in the middle, and her hair fell to her shoulders, white on one side and black on the other. She was a very complete old woman, but, alas, she was eyeless. And when I tried to construct the eyes, she would shrivel and rot in my sight. But tonight I was thinking as I had never thought before, and the eyes were just creeping into the head when I heard a terrible crash outside, as if some heavy substance had fallen. Of a sudden, the door was flung open and 2 maidservants entered. They glanced at the rug under my chair, and at that they turned a sick white, cried on God, and huddled out. How dare you enter the library in this manner? I demanded sternly. No answer came back from them, so I started in pursuit. I found all the servants in the house gathered in a knot at the end of the passage. Mrs. Pebble, I said smartly to the housekeeper, I want those 2 women discharged tomorrow. It's an outrage. You ought to be more careful. But she was not attending to me. Her face was distorted with terror. Oh, dear, she went. We'd better all go to the library together, says she to the others. Am I the master of my own house, Mrs. Pebble? I inquired, bringing my knuckles down with a bang on the table. None of them seemed to see me or hear me. I might as well have been shrieking in a desert. I followed them down the passage and forbade them to enter the library. But they trooped past me and stood with a clutter round the hearth rug. Then 3 or 4 of them began dragging and lifting as if they were lifting a helpless body, and stumbled with their imaginary burthen over to a sofa. Old Soames, the butler, stood near. Poor young gentleman, he said with a sob. I've known him since he was a baby, and to think of him being dead like this, and so young, too. I crossed the room. What's all this, Soames? I cried, shaking him roughly by the shoulders. I'm not dead. I'm here. As he did not stir, I got a little scared. Soames, old friend, I called. Don't you know me? Don't you know the little boy you used to play with? Say I'm Not dead, Soames, please. Soames. He stooped down and kissed the sofa. I think one of the men ought to ride over to the village for the doctor, Mr. Soames, says Mrs. Pebble, and he shuffled out to give the order. Now, this doctor was an ignorant dog whom I had been forced to exclude from the house because he went about proclaiming his belief in a saving God at the same time that he proclaimed himself a man of science. He, I was resolved, should never cross my threshold, and I followed Mrs. Pebble through the house, screaming out prohibition. But I did not catch even a groan from her, not a nod of the head, nor a cast of the eye to show that she had heard. I met the doctor at the door of the library. Well, I sneered, throwing my hand in his face. Have you come to teach me some new prayers? He brushed by me as if he had not felt the blow, and knelt down by the sofa. Rupture of a vessel on the brain, I think, he says to Soames and Mrs. Pebble after a short moment. He has been dead some hours. Poor fellow. You had better telegraph for his sister, and I will send up the undertaker to arrange the body. You liar! I yelled. You whining liar! How have you the insolence to tell my servants that I am dead when you see me here face to face? He was far in the passage with Soames and Mrs. Pebble at his heels ere I had ended, and not one of the three turned round. All that night I sat in the library. Strangely enough, I had no wish to sleep, nor during the time that followed had I any craving to eat. In the morning, the men came, and although I ordered them out, they proceeded to minister about something I could not see. So, all day, I stayed in the library or wandered about the house, and at night the men came again, bringing with them a coffin. Then, in my humor, thinking it a shame that so fine a coffin should be empty, I lay the night in it and slept a soft, dreamless sleep, the softest sleep I have ever slept. And when the men came the next day, I rested still, and the undertaker shaved me. A strange valet. On the evening after that, I was coming downstairs when I noted some luggage in the hall, and so learned that my sister had arrived. I had not seen this woman since her marriage, and I loathed her more than I loathed any creature in this ill-organized world. She was very beautiful, I think, tall and dark and straight as a ramrod, and she had an unruly passion for scandal and dress. I suppose the reason I disliked her so intensely was that she had a habit of making one aware of her presence when she was several yards off. At 9:30, my sister came down to the library in a very charming wrap, and I soon found that she was as insensible to my presence as the others. I trembled with rage to see her kneel down by the coffin. My coffin. But when she bent over to kiss the pillow, I threw away control. A knife, which had been used to cut string, was lying upon a table. I seized it and drove it into her neck. She fled from the room screaming. "Come, oh come!" she cried, her voice quivering with anguish. "The corpse is bleeding from the nose." Then I cursed her. On the evening of the 3rd day, there was a heavy fall of snow. About 11 o'clock, I observed that the house was filled with people, mutes, and folk of the county who came for the obsequies. I went into the library and sat still and waited. Soon came the men, and they closed the lid of the coffin and bore it out on their shoulders. And yet I sat, feeling rather sadly that something of mine had been taken away. I could not quite think what. For half an hour, perhaps, I sat, dreaming. And then I glided to the hall door. There was no trace left of the funeral. But after a while, I sighted a black thread winding slowly across the white plain. "I'm not dead," I moaned, and rubbed my face in the pure snow, and tossed it on my neck and hair. Sweet God, I am not dead. Stay with me. I'll be right back. Our second O'Sullivan story may not have a title as exciting as the first, but what a great narrative. Published in 1917, tuck in everybody, for Vincent O'Sullivan's The Interval. Mrs. Wilton passed through a little alley leading from one of the gates which are around Regent's Park, and came out on the wide and quiet street. She walked along slowly, peering anxiously from side to side so as not to overlook the number. She pulled her furs closer round her. After her years in India, this London damp seemed very harsh. Still, it was not a fog today. A dense haze, gray and tinged ruddy, lay between the houses, sometimes blowing with a little wet kiss against the face. Mrs. Wilton's hair and eyelashes and her furs were powdered with tiny drops. But there was nothing in the weather to blur the sight. She could see the faces of people some distance off and read the signs on the shops. Before the door of a dealer in antiques and second-hand furniture, she paused and looked through the shabby, uncleaned window at an unassorted heap of things, many of them of great value. She read the name fastened on the pane in white letters. Yes, this is the place. She opened the door, which met her entrance with an ill-tempered jangle. From somewhere in the black depths of the shop, the dealer came forward. He had a clammy white face with a sparse black beard and wore spectacles. Mrs. Wilton spoke to him in a low voice. A look of complicity, perhaps of irony, passed through the dealer's cynical and sad eyes, but he bowed gravely and respectfully. Yes, she is here, madam. Whether she will see you or not, I do not know. She is not always well. She has her moods, and then we have to be so careful. The police, not that they would touch a lady like you, but the poor alien has not much chance these days. Mrs. Wilton followed him to the back of the shop, where there was a winding staircase. She knocked over a few things in her passage and stooped to pick them up, but the dealer kept muttering, "It does not matter. Surely it does not matter." He lit a candle. "You must go up these stairs. They are very dark. Be careful. When you come to a door, open it and go straight in." He stood at the foot of the stairs, holding the light high above his head, and she ascended. The room was not very large, and it seemed very ordinary. There were some flimsy, uncomfortable chairs in gilt and red. 2 large palms were in corners. Under a glass cover on the table, was a view of Rome. The room had not a businesslike look, thought Mrs. Wilton. There was no suggestion of the office or waiting room where people came and went all day. Yet you would not say that it was a private room which was lived in. There were no books or papers about. Every chair was in the place it had been placed when the room was last swept. There was no fire, and it was very cold. To the right of the window was a door, covered with a plush curtain. Mrs. Wilton sat down near the table and watched this door. She thought it must be through it that the soothsayer would come forth. She laid her hands listlessly, one on top of the other, on the table. This must be the 10th seer she had consulted since Hugh had been killed. She thought them over. No, this must be the 11th. She had forgotten that frightening man in Paris who said he had been a priest. Yet of them all, it was only he who had told her anything definite. But even he could do no more than tell the past. He told of her marriage. He even had the duration of it right, 21 months. He told, too, of their time in India. At least he knew that her husband had been a soldier, and said he had been on service in the colonies. On the whole, though, he had been as unsatisfactory as the others. None of them had given her the consolation she sought. She did not want to be told of the past. If Hugh was gone forever, then with him had gone all her love of living, her courage, all her better self. She wanted to be lifted out of the despair, the dazed, aimless drifting from day to day, longing at night for the morning, and in the morning for the fall of night, which had been her life since his death. If somebody could assure her that it was not all over, that he was somewhere, not too far away, unchanged from what he had been here, with his crisp hair and rather slow smile and lean brown face, that he saw her sometimes, that he had not forgotten her. Oh, Hugh, darling. When she looked up again, the woman was sitting there before her. Mrs. Wilton had not heard her come in. With her experience, wide enough now, of seers and fortune-tellers of all kinds, she saw at once that this woman was different from the others. Oh, she was used to the quick, appraising look, the attempts, sometimes clumsy, but often cleverly disguised, to collect some fragments of information whereupon to erect a plausible vision. But this woman looked as if she took it out of herself. Not that her appearance suggested intercourse with the spiritual world, more than the others had done. It suggested that, in fact, considerably less. Some of the others were frail, yearning, evaporated creatures, and the ex-priest in Paris had something terrible and condemned in his look. He might well sup with the devil, that man, and probably did in some way or other. But this was a little, fat, weary-faced woman, about 50, who only did not look like a cook because she looked more like a sempstress. Her black dress was all covered with white threads. Mrs. Wilton looked at her with some embarrassment. It seemed more reasonable to be asking a woman like this about altering a gown than about intercourse with the dead. That seemed even absurd in such a very commonplace presence. The woman seemed timid and oppressed. She breathed heavily and kept rubbing her dingy hands, which looked moist, one over the other. She was always wetting her lips and coughed with a little dry cough. But in her, these signs of nervous exhaustion suggested overwork in a close atmosphere, bending too close over the sewing machine. Her uninteresting hair, like a rat's pelt, was eked out with a false addition of another color. Some threads had got caught into her hair, too. Her harried, uneasy look caused Mrs. Wilton to ask, compassionately, "Are you much worried by the police?" "Oh, the police. Why don't they leave us alone? You never know who comes to see you. Why don't they leave me alone? I'm a good woman. I only think. What I do is no harm to anyone," she continued in an uneven, querulous voice, always rubbing her hands together nervously. She seemed to the visitor to be talking at random, just gabbling, like children do sometimes before they fall asleep. I wanted to explain," hesitated Mrs. Wilton, but the woman, with her head pressed close against the back of the chair, was staring beyond her at the wall. Her face had lost whatever little expression it had. It was blank. When she spoke, it was very slowly, and her voice was guttural. "Can't you see him? It seems strange to me that you can't see him. He is so near you. He is passing his arm round your shoulders." This was a frequent gesture of Hugh's, and indeed at that moment she felt that somebody was very near her, bending over her. She was enveloped in tenderness. Only a very thin veil, she felt, prevented her from seeing. But the woman saw. She was describing Hugh minutely, even the little things like the burn on his right hand. Is he happy? Oh, ask him, does he love me?" The result was so far beyond anything she had hoped for that she was stunned. She could only stammer the first thing that came into her head. Does he love me?" "He loves you. He won't answer, but he loves you. He wants me to make you see him. He is disappointed, I think, because I can't. But I can't unless you do it yourself." After a while, she said, "I think you will see him again. You think of nothing else. He is very close to us now." Then she collapsed and fell into a heavy sleep and lay there motionless, hardly breathing. Mrs. Wilton put some notes on the table and stole out on tiptoe. She seemed to remember that downstairs in the dark shop, the dealer with the waxen face detained her to show some old silver and jewelry and such like. But she did not come to herself. She had no precise recollection of anything till she found herself entering a church near Portland Place. It was an unlikely act in her normal moments. Why did she go in there? She acted like one walking in her sleep. The church was old and dim, with high black pews. There was nobody there. Mrs. Wilton sat down in one of the pews and bent forward with her face in her hands. After a few minutes, she saw that a soldier had come in noiselessly and placed himself about half a dozen rows ahead of her. He never turned round, but presently she was struck by something familiar in the figure. First, she thought vaguely that the soldier looked like her Hugh. Then, when he put up his hand, she saw who it was. She hurried out of the pew and ran towards him. "Oh, Hugh! Hugh! Have you come back?" He looked around with a smile. He had not been killed. It was all a mistake. He was going to speak. Footsteps sounded hollow in the empty church. She turned and glanced down the dim aisle. It was an old sexton or verger who approached. "I thought I heard you call," he said. "I was speaking to my husband." But Hugh was nowhere to be seen. "He was here a moment ago." She looked about in anguish. "He must have gone to the door." "There's nobody here," said the old man gently. "Only you and me. Ladies are often taken funny since the war. There was one in here yesterday afternoon said she was married in this church, and her husband had promised to meet her here. Perhaps you were married here?" "No," said Mrs. Wilton, desolately. "I was married in India." It might have been 2 or 3 days after that, when she went into a small Italian restaurant in the Bayswater district. She often went out for her meals now. She had developed an exhausting cough, and she found that it somehow became less troublesome when she was in a public place looking at strange faces. In her flat, there were all the things that Hugh had used. The trunks and bags still had his name on them with the labels of places where they had been together. They were like stabs. In the restaurant, people came and went, many soldiers, too, among them, just glancing at her in her corner. This day, as it chanced, she was rather late, and there was nobody there. She was very tired. She nibbled at the food they brought her. She could almost have cried from tiredness and loneliness and the ache in her heart. Then suddenly, he was before her, sitting there opposite at the table. It was as it was in the days of their engagement, when they used to sometimes lunch at restaurants. He was not in uniform. He smiled at her and urged her to eat, just as he used to in those days. I met her that afternoon as she was crossing Kensington Gardens, and she told me about it. "I have been with Hugh." She seemed most happy. "Did he say anything?" No. Yes, I think he did, but I could not quite hear. My head was so very tired. The next time." I did not see her for some time after that. She found, I think, that by going to places where she had once seen him, the old church, the little restaurant, she was more certain to see him again. She never saw him at home, but in the street or the park, he would often walk along beside her. Once, he saved her from being run over. She said she actually felt his hand grabbing her arm suddenly when the car was nearly upon her. She had given me the address of the clairvoyant, and it is through that strange woman that I know, or seem to know, what followed. Mrs. Wilton was not exactly ill last summer, not so ill at least as to keep to her bedroom, but she was very thin, and her great handsome eyes always seemed to be staring at some point beyond, searching. There was a look in them that seamen's eyes sometimes have when they are drawing on a coast of which they are not very certain. She lived almost in solitude. She hardly ever saw anybody, except when they sought her out. To those who were anxious about her, she laughed and said she was very well. One sunny morning, she was lying awake, waiting for the maid to bring her tea. The shy London sunlight peeped through the blinds. The room had a fresh, happy look. When she heard the door open, she thought that the maid had come in. Then she saw that Hugh was standing at the foot of the bed. He was in uniform this time, and looked as he had looked the day he went away. "Oh, Hugh, speak to me. Will you not say just one word?" He smiled and threw back his head, just as he used to in the old days at her mother's house, when he wanted to call her out of the room without attracting the attention of the others. He moved towards the door, still signing to her to follow him. He picked up her slippers on his way and held them out to her as if he wanted her to put them on. She slipped out of bed hastily. It is strange that when they came to look through her things after her death, the slippers could never be found. Introduction information for this episode is from the Modernist Journals Project and their biography written by Robert Sullivan, and other information in our show notes. Music for today is Coal Clouds from Rowie Spigler, Ebb and Flow from Ziv Moran, When from Michel Nobler, and Random Symmetries, also from Rowie Spigler. Any good ghost stories? Let us know. Right here in comments. Or you can email us at fastasleepwithginamarie44@gmail.com. Find us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Your reviews, your comments, your likes, and your subscriptions are very important. Thank you so much. And thank you for listening. Keyword in both stories: thread. Next week, October's Own, Stephen King. Good night.